friends, this is the Mrs. Wolfie from our half-acre homestead. I'm making a turkey pie, turkey veg pie for supper tonight. And a lot of people have asked me for my pie dough recipe. So I'm going to break this into 2 videos so that I always have a pie dough recipe for you folks to refer to, okay? Here we have about 2.5 cups of flour. I'm not putting it all in, so because I need some for rolling. So I'm gonna say 2 cups of flour. You're gonna need some ice water. Here I have I have 1/3 of a cup of lard, and I have frozen my lard. Okay. Here is 1 pound of cold butter, and you're only going to need about 1/3 of a cup of it. Okay. So this is how I make my pastry. The only reason I'm not putting salt in here, folks, is because there is salt in the butter. Okay. So now this is some of this flour is the flour that I oven canned, and every once in a while I'll find a lump. So I just want to make sure I've got them all busted up here. If you oven can your flour and it comes out in a cake, just break it up with a steak knife in the jar, put it in a plastic bag, and roll it with your rolling pin, and it'll break it all up. I just forgot to do that before I put it in the can. Okay, we're going to take a cheese grater, and on the largest setting, we're going to take our frozen, if I can get it out of the bowl. There we go. We're going to take our frozen 1/3 of a cup of lard. We're going to drop it in the flour and roll it in the flour. And then we're going to grate it. Now, this actually might be too much, but we'll see. The trick to the pastry, okay, guys, is to make sure your fat lumps don't melt. You want them in between the layers of your pastry so that when it's baking, then they melt. Okay, so you don't want your fats worked right into the dough. And you have to do this pretty quick because you don't want to melt it in your hand either. You want it to melt in the pastry, not in your hand. Ha ha ha. God, I'm starting to show my age. All right, and every once in a while, if you notice, I grab it and I toss it in a bit of flour. Okay, that's our, and we're not going to need a whole lot of butter because I only have 2 cups of flour in here. Now I am just going to open one end of this because I don't want to cover the entire pound of butter in flour either. I'm just going to dip this in the flour, and I'm going to grate some butter in it. Now the butter needs to be cold. It can be frozen or it can be fresh out of the fridge, but it has to be grateable. See how that grates nice and lovely? And you want to toss that around in the flour to make sure that you've got it all coated. And you got some butter inside your grater, just put a handful of flour in there. And there you go. Now, a lot of people don't like to use cheese graters. My son hates it when I use it. You just take your scrubbing brush, washing your jars, and you just put it in the sink of dishes, and you just scrub it inside out with the brush. And that is all the butter I think we're going to need. Okay, I haven't got my glasses on, so it's a good thing you can't see me squinting here. All right, now we're going to make a well in the center, and it's probably not going to take more than 1/2 cup of water, but I use ice water again to keep this butter and fats as hard as possible. And we're going to just pour in a little bit. I'm going to say, 1/2 cup maybe. I'm going to use my spoon at first, and I'm going to turn the flour mixture into the center of the well. And then we're just going to toss it. You don't really mix it so much as you toss it. You can even do this. See, I'm just grabbing it and scraping it back into the center. And there's still lots of flour in there. See, it's starting to form a ball. Lots of flour in there, so I'm going to add a little bit more ice water, trying to keep the ice cube from going in. You could always add a little bit more water if it's a bit too dusty dry, but you can't take water out. You can't mix more flour in once it's too wet. Well, I guess you could, but I'd rather err on the side of caution. Now, a little bit more water. And I'm going to say I was right on the money with a half a cup. I just keep the ice cubes in the water to keep it cold while I'm firing stuff all over the place here. Okay, now it feels really almost gooey. And I'm going to grab a handful and I'm going to almost knead it, but not quite. I'm just going to kind of work it together with my hands like this. Flip it over. And if I still find too much flour on the bottom of the bowl, then no, it's perfect. It's just about perfect. Okay, I have a little log of dough here. A little bit of flour on the bottom of the bowl is not going to be a problem. But when I pinch the log in half, it should, you know, kind of glue together. But you just want to press it gently in your hand. You don't want to roll it and work it and all that stuff. You just want to make a ball. We're going to dust our cloth with flour. And everybody always asks me, why do I use a cloth? Because it makes cleanup so much easier. I have a couple of cotton tablecloths that I always seem to use specifically for bread and pastry. All right. Take a little bit of flour, flour our rolling pin. You do know never to wash a wooden rolling pin, eh, folks? I mean, you can scrape it with the blunt side of a butter knife, and you can give it a damp wipe with a cloth, but never ever put this in the dishwasher or in the dishwater. It will swell, it will crack, it will do all sorts of nasty things. Now, I don't know how well you can see that, but I can see the flecks of butter in my pastry. I'm just hoping I made enough for the pie, because I've never measured it before. I always just wing things together. And there you have it, folks. This is enough for a double pie crust or a very thick single pie crust, like if you were making a sweet potato or pumpkin pie. All right, I've got to get back in the saddle here. And if you notice, folks, I never use a mixer when I'm making pie dough, because one very simple reason. It can be very easy to overwork the dough. All right, there is our pie crust for tonight's supper. This is the Mrs. Wolfie from our half-acre homestead saying, it's not rocket science, folks. It just takes patience and technique. And those things you aren't learned overnight. You just gotta practice. All right, we'll see you guys later. I've got a turkey pie to make.